My husband mocked me at his company party, saying, "My wife? She's just a housewife. She's never had a real career." And everyone laughed. Humiliated, I ran to the bathroom, where an elegant woman looked me in the eyes and asked, "Are you Louise Patterson?" When I answered yes, she broke down in tears. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't touched, watching my husband Gerald laugh too loudly at something his boss had said. The crystal chandeliers overhead cast everything in a golden glow that felt almost mocking. Around me, men in tailored suits and women in designer dresses mingled effortlessly, their conversations flowing like the expensive wine being poured at the open bar. I didn't belong here. That's what Gerald's eyes had told me when I'd emerged from our bedroom earlier that evening in my navy dress, the nicest thing I owned, purchased on clearance 3 years ago for our daughter Emily's college graduation. "That'll do, I suppose," he'd said, not looking up from his phone. 32 years of marriage, and somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible. The annual executive party at Duncan Technologies was the kind of event Gerald lived for. He'd made senior vice president 2 years ago, and ever since these gatherings had become his stage. I was simply a prop, expected to smile, nod, and confirm that yes, my husband was indeed brilliant. I smoothed down my dress and tried to make myself smaller, an old habit that had become second nature. At 67, I'd perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. "Gerald," a booming voice cut through the ambient noise. Barry Duncan himself, the company's founder and chairman, was approaching with a small entourage. My husband's face lit up like a child seeing presents under the Christmas tree. "Barry, great party, as always," Gerald said, his voice taking on that particular pitch he used with important people. Slightly higher, enthusiastically deferential. "Wouldn't be complete without my top performers," Barry replied, clapping Gerald on the shoulder. His eyes swept over me briefly, the way you might glance at a coat rack. "And this must be the wife." "Yes, this is Louise," Gerald said. There was something in his tone I couldn't quite place. "My wife." The way he said it made it sound like a job title I'd failed at. "Wonderful to meet you, Louise," Barry said politely. "What do you do?" It was an innocent question. A normal question at a party full of accomplished professionals. But I watched something flicker across Gerald's face. Was it embarrassment? "Oh, Louise?" Gerald laughed, and the sound made my stomach tighten. "She's just a housewife. Never had a real career." The words hung in the air like smoke. Just a housewife. Never had a real career. Around us, the small group chuckled. It wasn't cruel laughter, not exactly. It was the polite, social kind of amusement that fills awkward moments at corporate events. But each laugh felt like a small cut. "Raised 3 kids, though," Gerald continued, as if offering me a consolation prize. "Someone had to make sure they got to soccer practice, right?" More polite laughter. Barry had already lost interest, his attention shifting to someone more important across the room. The group began to disperse, conversations fragmenting into new configurations. I stood there, my champagne glass trembling slightly in my hand. Never had a real career. The words echoed in my mind, gaining weight with each repetition. I thought of the basement office where I'd spent countless hours, the glow of the monitor the only light at 2 in the morning. I thought of the elegant algorithms I'd crafted, the systems I'd built from nothing but logic and imagination. I thought of the day I'd walked away from it all because Emily was sick and someone needed to be there, and Gerald's career was at a critical juncture. I'd made a choice, a sacrifice. I'd told myself it was temporary, that I'd go back when the kids were older. But 1 year became 2, became 5, became a lifetime. And now, apparently, it meant I'd never had a real career. "Excuse me," I whispered to no one in particular. No one was listening anyway. I walked quickly toward the back of the ballroom, past clusters of people who didn't see me, toward the hallway where I'd spotted the restrooms earlier. My vision was blurring, and I couldn't tell if it was from tears or from rage, or from the sudden, crushing weight of insignificance. The bathroom was blessedly empty, all marble and gold fixtures and soft lighting that should have been flattering, but somehow made everything worse. I locked myself in the largest stall, the accessible one at the end. and sat on the closed toilet seat, pressing my palms against my eyes. Just a housewife. I'd given up everything. My work, my identity, my future. I'd restructured my entire life around Gerald's career, around our children's needs, around everyone except myself. And this was how I was described. Dismissed. Reduced to just. The bathroom door opened, and I heard the click of expensive heels on marble. Seriously, the audacity of men at these things, a woman's voice said. She wasn't talking to me, probably on the phone. They spend 5 minutes networking and think they've solved world hunger. I tried to be quiet, to wait her out, but a sob escaped before I could stop it. The footsteps stopped. Hello? Are you all right in there? I'm fine, I managed, my voice obviously betraying the lie. You don't sound fine. There was a pause. I'm going to slip some tissues under the door, okay? These bathroom attendants always stock the good kind. A moment later, a neat stack of soft tissues appeared beneath the stall door. I picked them up, grateful despite my humiliation. Thank you, I said, wiping my eyes. Do you want to talk about it? I'm told I'm an excellent listener, though my ex-husband would probably dispute that claim. There was something warm in her voice, something that made me think of my college roommate, of the friends I'd lost touch with over the decades. I unlocked the stall door and stepped out. The woman standing before me was probably in her mid-50s, elegant in a way that seemed effortless. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, and she wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than my car. But her eyes were kind, crinkled at the corners with smile lines. That bad, huh? She said gently, taking in my tear-stained face. My husband. I started, then stopped. How could I explain? He told everyone I was just a housewife, that I never had a real career. The woman's expression shifted, hardening. Men can be such idiots, she said flatly. Especially the ones who wouldn't know a real accomplishment if it bit them. She leaned against the marble counter, studying me. I'm going to guess he wouldn't last a day doing what you do. Running a household, raising children, that's project management at its finest. People who've never done it have no idea. I laughed weakly. That's kind of you, but nothing. I mean it. She crossed her arms. Though I have to ask, did you really never work outside the home? You don't have to answer. I'm just curious. Something in her directness, in the genuine interest in her eyes, made me want to talk. Maybe it was the champagne I'd barely sipped. Maybe it was the humiliation still burning in my chest. Maybe I just needed someone to see me. I was a software engineer, I said quietly, a long time ago, before it was common for women. Her eyebrows rose. Really? Where did you work? Small startup in the early 90s. Nothing you'd have heard of. TechCore Solutions. We developed operating systems and enterprise software. I dabbed at my eyes again. I was one of the lead developers. It was exciting work, revolutionary even. But then I got pregnant with our first child, and I trailed off. The story was too familiar, too common. Life happened. TechCore Solutions, the woman repeated slowly. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? What kind of work did you do there? Systems architecture mostly. Low-level programming. I developed a modular operating system framework that could scale across different hardware configurations. It was designed to be stable, adaptable, efficient. I smiled sadly. I was quite proud of it, actually. We licensed it to a few companies before TechCore went under in '95. The woman had gone very still. What's your name? She asked, and there was a new intensity in her voice. Louise, I said. Louise Mitchell. Well, it was Patterson back then, before I got married. Louise Patterson? The woman's hand had risen to her mouth. You're the Louise Patterson? You wrote the Patterson Protocol? I blinked at her, confused. I hadn't heard that name in decades. Yes, that was my core architecture framework. How do you— Oh my goodness, she breathed. She was staring at me like I'd just materialized from thin air. Louise, do you have any idea what happened to your code? It was licensed out before the company dissolved, I said slowly. I assumed it just disappeared. Most startup code from that era did. Disappeared? The woman laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was shocked, almost delighted. Louise, your framework didn't disappear. It was acquired by Duncan Technologies in their early days. They built their entire enterprise operating system on top of it. Every piece of software this company has created for the last 30 years, the platform that's made them billions, it all runs on the foundation you created. The bathroom seemed to tilt around me. That's not possible. It absolutely is possible. I should know. She extended her hand, and I shook it numbly. I'm Victoria Pratt, CEO of Duncan Technologies. And you, Louise Mitchell, are a legend in this company. We teach case studies about the Patterson Protocol in our internal training programs. We just never knew what happened to you. My mind was reeling. This couldn't be real. This elegant woman wasn't really telling me that my work, the code I'd written in a cramped office on a computer that would be laughable by today's standards, had become the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar company. But I was just one developer. There were others, who've all been credited and compensated over the years, through various channels, Victoria said. But you vanished. We've had people trying to track you down for consulting opportunities, for advisory positions. Louise Patterson just disappeared. I got married, I said faintly. Changed my name. Moved to the suburbs. Had kids. And your husband just told everyone you never had a real career. Victoria's voice had turned cold. Which company does he work for? He's here. Senior VP of something. I don't even remember his exact title. Victoria's expression shifted into something calculating. Louise, would you trust me to do something that might feel a bit uncomfortable, but might also feel very, very good? I looked at her. This stranger who'd handed me tissues, who'd listened, who'd seen me, really seen me. What did you have in mind? I asked. She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd built a company from the ground up and knew exactly how to command a room. How would you like to make a re-entrance to that party? My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Victoria stood beside me at the bathroom door, her hand resting gently on my arm, waiting for my answer. I don't know if I can, I admitted. My voice sounded small, defeated. I've spent so many years being invisible, being dismissed. I'm not sure I remember how to be seen. Victoria turned to face me fully, her expression serious but kind. Louise, I'm not going to force you to do anything, but I want you to understand something. Your work, the code you wrote 3 decades ago, it's brilliant. It's still brilliant. We've built on it, refined it, expanded it. But the core architecture? That's all you. You created something that has powered communication systems, financial platforms, medical databases. Millions of people's lives have been touched by what you built. I felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't from humiliation. I didn't know, I whispered. I thought it all just ended. When TechCore dissolved, I thought my work dissolved with it. It didn't end. It evolved. It grew. Victoria squeezed my arm gently. And the man out there who told everyone you never had a real career? He's been collecting a very nice salary from a company built on your foundation. There's a certain poetic justice waiting to happen, if you'll let me help you claim it. I thought about Gerald, about the way he'd laughed, about how he'd reduced 32 years of my sacrifice to a punchline, about how he'd never once, in all our years together, asked me if I missed my work, if I regretted walking away, if I ever wondered what might have been. I thought about my children, Emily, Leonard, and Vincent, all grown now, all successful in their own ways. I'd given them everything, and I didn't regret that. But somewhere in the giving, I'd lost myself entirely. Okay, I said, my voice stronger now. What do I need to do? Victoria's smile was fierce. Just stand beside me and let me do the talking. Unless you want to speak, of course. But I suspect seeing your husband's face will be satisfaction enough. She checked her reflection in the mirror, smoothed her already perfect hair, then looked at me critically. You look like you've been crying. I have been crying. Good. Let them see it. Let them see exactly what their casual cruelty does. She paused. Unless you'd rather freshen up? I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my makeup smudged. I looked exactly like what I was. A woman who'd been broken by thoughtless words. And you know what? I didn't want to hide it. No, I said. Let them see. Victoria linked her arm through mine, and together we walked out of the bathroom and back toward the ballroom. With each step, I felt something shifting inside me. It wasn't confidence exactly. I'd lost that too many years ago to reclaim it in a single moment. But it was something. A spark. A tiny flame of the person I used to be, before I'd learned to make myself small. The party was in full swing, the noise level even higher than before. I spotted Gerald immediately. He was holding court with a group of executives, his gestures broad and animated. He was telling a story, probably about some deal he'd closed, some brilliant strategy he'd implemented. He didn't see me approaching. Victoria guided me through the crowd with the ease of someone who commanded respect simply by existing. People moved aside for her, conversations pausing as she passed. I'd never experienced anything like it. This ripple of attention, of deference. We stopped at the front of the ballroom, near the small stage where speeches were typically given. Victoria released my arm and stepped up onto the platform. Someone handed her a microphone as if they'd been waiting for her to ask for it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." The room quieted almost instantly. I stood at the base of the stage, suddenly aware of hundreds of eyes turning toward us. My instinct was to flee, to disappear back into the bathroom or out to the parking lot. But Victoria glanced down at me with such warmth, such certainty, that I stayed rooted in place. "I know we usually save the speeches for later in the evening," Victoria continued, "but something extraordinary just happened, and I couldn't wait to share it. Tonight, quite by accident, I discovered that we have a very special guest at our party. Someone whose contribution to this company has been incalculable, though she's never received the recognition she deserves." I saw Gerald turn toward the stage, his expression mildly curious. He still hadn't noticed me. "Many of you know that Duncan Technologies was built on the acquisition of several key technologies in our early years," Victoria said. "One of those was an operating system framework called the Patterson Protocol. It became the foundation, quite literally, of every product we've ever developed. We teach it in our training programs. We reference it in our patents. It's embedded in our company's DNA." Now I saw recognition dawning on some faces. The senior developers, the longtime employees. They knew the Patterson Protocol. They just didn't know who Patterson was. For years, we've tried to locate the brilliant engineer who created that framework. We wanted to offer consulting opportunities, advisory positions, proper credit and compensation for the work that made this company possible. Victoria paused, and her eyes found mine. "Tonight, I found her. She's been here all along." Gerald was frowning now, scanning the crowd, trying to understand what was happening. "Louise, would you join me up here, please?" Victoria extended her hand toward me. My legs felt like water, but I climbed the 3 steps onto the stage. The room was absolutely silent. I could feel every eye on me, and for the first time in decades, I didn't try to shrink from the attention. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Louise Mitchell," Victoria said, her voice ringing with pride. "Formerly Louise Patterson, the creator of the Patterson Protocol, the woman whose code has powered every significant innovation this company has made for 30 years. The silence stretched for a heartbeat, then another. I saw Gerald's face go pale, his mouth opening slightly in shock. Around him, his colleagues were staring, some in confusion, some in dawning recognition, some in what looked like awe. "Louise walked away from software engineering in the mid-90s to raise her family," Victoria continued. "She never sought credit. She never asked for recognition. She simply moved on with her life, believing her work had disappeared with the startup that originally employed her." Victoria turned to face me directly now, speaking to me as much as to the crowd. "But your work didn't disappear, Louise. It's here. It's in every server, every platform, every solution we've deployed. You built something that lasted, something that mattered, something that changed the landscape of enterprise technology." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight with emotion. Not tears this time, but something bigger, something that felt like reclamation. "I wanted everyone here to know," Victoria said, addressing the crowd again, that the woman who was just described to me as just a housewife with no real career is, in fact, one of the most significant contributors to this company's success. We owe her more than I can possibly express in a single evening. The room erupted in applause. It started slowly, then built like a wave, and suddenly people were standing, and the noise was thunderous. I stood there, overwhelmed, as hundreds of people I'd never met applauded work I'd done when many of them were still children. Through the crowd, I found Gerald's face. He looked stricken, frozen in place while everyone around him stood and clapped. Our eyes met across the distance, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. He was afraid. Of what? I wasn't sure yet, but I could see it clearly. Victoria leaned close to the microphone again. Now, I think we should all give Louise some space. This has been quite an overwhelming revelation for her, but I did want to make one more announcement while I have everyone's attention. The applause died down, though people remained standing. Effective immediately, I'm creating a new position at Duncan Technologies, Chief Technology Advisor, Legacy Systems. And Louise, if you're interested, I'd like to offer you that position. No pressure, no expectations. But your insights, your perspective, your understanding of the systems that built this company, they're invaluable. We should have found you years ago. We'd be honored if you'd consider working with us now. The room erupted again. I felt dizzy, disconnected from reality. This couldn't be happening. 20 minutes ago, I'd been crying in a bathroom stall, reduced to nothing by my husband's casual cruelty. Now I was being offered a position at one of the most successful technology companies in the country. Think about it, Victoria said softly, just to me. No rush, but the offer is genuine. She helped me down from the stage, and immediately I was surrounded by people. Engineers wanting to shake my hand, executives introducing themselves, longtime employees telling me stories about working with my code, about the problems it had solved, the innovations it had enabled. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Through the crowd, I caught glimpses of Gerald. He was still standing where I'd last seen him, isolated now as people moved away from him and toward me. One of his colleagues, I recognized him from earlier, leaned in and said something. Gerald's face went even paler. I wanted to feel triumphant. I wanted to feel vindicated, and part of me did. But mostly I felt sad. Sad that it had taken this public revelation for my own husband to see me as valuable. Sad that my worth had to be measured in corporate success and technological innovation before it counted. Sad that I'd spent so many years believing his version of my story instead of remembering my own. Mrs. Mitchell, or should I say, Ms. Patterson, a young woman in her 30s had made her way through the crowd. She had kind eyes behind stylish glasses. I'm Jennifer Park, Senior Software Architect. I just wanted to say that I wrote my master's thesis on the Patterson Protocol. Your work inspired me to go into systems architecture. I never thought I'd get to meet you. I'm just Louise, I said softly. And thank you. That means more than you know. I have so many questions, Jennifer said, her excitement barely contained. About your decision-making process, about the elegance of your modular approach, about... She stopped herself, laughing. Sorry, I'm overwhelming you. But maybe if you do take Ms. Pratt up on her offer, we could talk sometime. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. More people approached, more stories, more recognition. It was intoxicating and exhausting. Finally, Victoria appeared at my elbow. Let's get you some air, she suggested. You look like you could use a break. She guided me toward a balcony off the main ballroom, away from the crowd. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy warmth inside. I leaned against the railing, looking out at the city lights. That was quite something, I said eventually. You deserved it, Victoria replied simply. Every word was true. My husband looked like he was going to be sick. Your husband is going to be having a very difficult conversation with HR tomorrow morning, Victoria said, her tone matter of fact. Publicly humiliating a key contributor to the company's success, even if he didn't know who you were, shows remarkably poor judgment, especially from a senior executive who should know better. I turned to look at her. You're going to fire him? I'm going to let him explain himself to our chief people officer. What happens after that will be up to him and his record." She paused. "But between you and me, someone who treats his wife that way, who dismisses her that casually, that tells me a lot about his character. And character matters in leadership." I should have felt bad for Gerald. After 32 years of marriage, I should have felt something protective, something sympathetic. But all I felt was a strange, hollow relief. "I don't know what happens now," I admitted. "I don't know who I am if I'm not just his wife, their mother, the woman who makes dinner and remembers birthdays and keeps the house running." Victoria smiled. "Maybe it's time to find out." I stayed on that balcony for a long time, watching the city lights blur and sharpen as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. Victoria had been called back inside. CEO duties never really ended at these events, but she'd squeezed my hand before she left and told me to take all the time I needed. Through the glass doors, I could see the party continuing. People kept glancing toward the balcony, clearly curious about me, but no one interrupted. I was grateful for that. I needed to think. My phone buzzed in my small clutch purse. I pulled it out and saw a text from Emily, my oldest. "Mom, Dad just called me." He sounded weird. "Is everything okay?" I stared at the message for a long moment. What could I possibly say? Your father humiliated me in front of his entire company, and then I found out I'm actually kind of famous in the tech world, and now he might lose his job. I typed back, "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just an interesting evening. I'll call you tomorrow." Before I could put the phone away, it buzzed again. This time it was Leonard. "Dad says you caused a scene at his party?" And then Vincent. "What's going on?" Dad is freaking out. Of course. Of course Gerald had already spun this into a story where I was the problem, where I was the one who'd embarrassed him. I felt a familiar weight settling over my shoulders, the impulse to apologize, to smooth things over, to make everyone comfortable again. But then I remembered standing on that stage. I remembered the applause. I remembered Jennifer Park telling me she'd written her master's thesis about my work. I turned my phone off and put it away. The balcony door slid open, and I tensed, expecting another well-wisher or curious engineer. But it was Gerald. He looked terrible. His face was flushed, his tie loosened, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He stepped onto the balcony and closed the door behind him, and for a moment we just stood there, husband and wife, strangers in the dark. "Louise," he said finally. His voice was hoarse. "We need to talk. Do we?" I was surprised by how calm I sounded. "What you did in there." He stopped, swallowed hard. That was completely inappropriate. Humiliating me in front of my colleagues, in front of my boss. "I humiliated you?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "Gerald, I stood on a stage while someone told the truth about work I did 30 years ago. Work you never even knew about because you never asked. You never once asked me about my life before we got married. That's not fair. You never talked about it. Because you never wanted to hear it." My voice rose and I saw him flinch. "Every time I mentioned my old work, you changed the subject. You made it clear that my job was to support your career, raise our children, and not burden you with nostalgia about some startup that failed. I never said that. You didn't have to say it, Gerald. You showed me. Every single day for 32 years, you showed me exactly how much my past mattered to you. Which is to say, not at all." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was stressed. "Look, I'm sorry about what I said earlier. About the housewife thing. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I cut him off. "You meant exactly what you said. You think what I've done for the past 3 decades doesn't count as real work. You think raising our children, managing our home, sacrificing my career so you could have yours. You think that's nothing. That's not true." Then what would you call it, Gerald? What's the word for someone who gave up everything, and I mean everything, so that you could take that promotion that required relocating? So you could work late every night? So you could travel for weeks at a time? I became invisible so you could be visible and you didn't even notice. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Is this about money? Because if you want to work again, if you need something to do—" "Something to do?" I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. "Gerald, I was just offered a position as chief technology advisor at your company. I don't need you to give me permission to work. I don't need you to validate my worth. I just spent the last hour being told by actual experts that my contributions changed the entire landscape of enterprise technology. His jaw tightened. Right. Your big moment, your big revelation. Do you have any idea what you've done to my position here? What I've done? I stared at him. I didn't do anything to your position. You did that yourself when you publicly dismissed me. Barry is furious with me. Victoria's assistant called me into a meeting tomorrow morning with HR. People are looking at me like I'm... He stopped himself. Like you're what? A man who doesn't respect his wife? A man with poor judgment? A man who humiliated someone who turned out to be more accomplished than he realized? I shook my head. Those things are true, Gerald. This isn't my fault. I've worked for 15 years to get where I am at this company. 15 years of 80-hour weeks, of playing the politics, of doing everything right. And you're going to destroy that in one night because your feelings were hurt? The sheer audacity of that statement took my breath away. My feelings were hurt? Gerald, you reduced my entire life to a joke. You made me feel worthless in front of a room full of strangers. And now you're angry because there were consequences? I'm angry because my wife should have my back. His voice rose, and I saw people inside the ballroom turning to look at the balcony. He noticed too and lowered his voice to an angry hiss. You could have pulled me aside. You could have told me privately. Instead, you let that woman parade you around like some kind of trophy, like proof that I'm a terrible husband. I didn't let her do anything. She told the truth. And if the truth makes you look bad, maybe you should examine why that is. He stepped closer to me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not quite anger, not quite fear. Something desperate. Louise, please, if you care about me at all, if our marriage means anything to you, you'll fix this. You'll call Victoria tomorrow and decline the position. You'll tell everyone this was just a misunderstanding. I felt something break inside me. Some last, fragile thread of hope I'd been holding onto without realizing it. You want me to make myself small again, to disappear again, so you can be comfortable. I want my wife to act like my partner, instead of my enemy. I've been your partner for 32 years, Gerald. I've been your support system, your cheerleader, your invisible foundation. And the first time, the very first time, the spotlight shines on me instead of you. You can't handle it. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Explain it to me, because I genuinely don't understand how you can stand here, after what you said to me tonight, and act like I'm the one who betrayed you. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, I didn't know. About your work. About any of it. You never told me it was important. I shouldn't have had to tell you it was important. You should have asked. You should have cared. You should have seen me as a whole person with a history and accomplishments and dreams, not just as the woman who makes your dinner and raises your children. So what do you want from me now? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't ask about your ancient career. I'm sorry I didn't realize you were secretly some kind of coding genius. Is that what you want to hear? The word ancient hit like a slap. The word secretly, like I'd been hiding something from him instead of him never bothering to ask. No, I said quietly. That's not what I want to hear, because that's not an apology. That's you being angry that you got caught. There's a difference. He stared at me, and I saw the moment he realized he wasn't going to win this argument. His expression shifted, calculating. What about the kids? Emily, Leonard, Vincent. What are you going to tell them? The truth. That their father humiliated me, and I found out something important about my past, and everything changed. They'll think I'm a monster. Then maybe you should think about why that is. He flinched as if I'd struck him. For a long moment, we stood there in the cold night air, the sounds of the party muffled behind the glass. I should go back inside, I said finally. Victoria wanted to introduce me to some people. Louise, go home, Gerald. We'll talk later. When you've had time to think about what you really want to say to me. I walked past him, back toward the balcony door. His hand shot out and grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firm enough to stop me. Don't do this, he said, and his voice cracked. Don't throw away our marriage over one stupid comment. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. I'm not throwing away our marriage, Gerald. I'm just refusing to disappear anymore. If that's the same thing to you, then maybe we need to examine what our marriage actually is. I pulled my arm free gently and walked back inside. The party had shifted in my absence. People were leaving now, heading home or to late-night dinners or wherever successful people went after corporate events. But a small group had gathered near the bar, and I recognized several of them from earlier. Jennifer Park, a few other engineers, some executives I hadn't met yet. Victoria saw me and waved me over. Louise, perfect timing. I was just telling everyone about the consulting project we're starting next quarter. I think your insights would be invaluable. I joined the group, forcing my mind away from Gerald, away from the confrontation on the balcony, away from everything except this moment. These people wanted to talk to me about my work. They valued my opinion. They saw me. Tell me about the project, I said. Jennifer launched into an explanation of a major system overhaul they were planning. It was complex, technical, exactly the kind of problem I used to love solving. As she talked, I felt something awakening in my mind. Pathways that hadn't been used in decades, ways of thinking I'd forgotten I possessed. The main challenge is maintaining backward compatibility while implementing the new protocols, Jennifer was saying. We don't want to break any existing integrations, but the old architecture is showing its age. What if you implemented a translation layer? I heard myself say. Something that could interpret requests from legacy systems and translate them into the new protocol format. That way you could phase the transition over time instead of forcing a hard cutover. Jennifer's eyes widened. That's brilliant. We'd been thinking about parallel systems, but a translation layer would be so much more elegant. You'd need to account for latency, I continued, my mind racing now. But if you cache the most common translations and implement predictive loading based on usage patterns, you could minimize the performance impact. This is exactly what we needed, one of the other engineers said. We've been stuck on this for weeks. Victoria was watching me with a small smile. Still think you don't have anything to contribute, Louise? I smiled back, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'm starting to reconsider. We talked for another hour. About systems and protocols, about elegant solutions and creative problems, about the kind of work that had once made me feel alive. And slowly, conversation by conversation, I felt myself remembering who I used to be. Eventually, the group began to disperse. People exchanged business cards with me, actual business cards, as if I were a professional colleague and not just someone's wife. Jennifer hugged me before she left and made me promise to have coffee with her soon. Finally, it was just Victoria and me again. Thank you, I said simply, for all of this, for seeing me. Don't thank me yet, Victoria said with a slight smile. That job offer was genuine. If you accept it, I'm going to work you hard. We have a lot of ground to cover, and not a lot of people with your particular expertise. I haven't written code in 30 years. But you understand systems thinking. You understand elegant architecture. Those skills don't disappear, Louise. They evolve. She paused. Think about it. Sleep on it. But I meant what I said. We need you. I drove home alone. Gerald had left at some point, probably right after our conversation on the balcony. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but I could see light coming from his study window. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Then I got out, walked to the front door, and let myself in. Gerald was in his study, hunched over his laptop, still in his suit. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway. We need to talk, I said. Really talk, about what happens next. He closed his laptop slowly. Okay, he said. Let's talk. But as I looked at him, this man I'd been married to for over 3 decades, this man who'd just proven he didn't really see me at all, I realized I didn't know where to start. So I started with the only truth I knew for certain. I'm going to accept Victoria's job offer, I said, and I don't need your permission or your approval. I just thought you should know. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know about what came next. Gerald stared at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he stood up from his desk chair and I saw his hands were shaking. You're serious, he said. It wasn't a question. Completely serious. Louise, think about what you're doing. Think about what this means. I have a meeting with HR tomorrow morning. If you show up there as their new chief technology advisor, it's going to look like… Like what? Like you publicly humiliated someone important to the company and there were consequences? I kept my voice level, calm. Gerald, what happens to you at work is no longer my responsibility to manage. No longer your… He stopped, took a breath. We're married. We're supposed to be a team. We were never a team. I was your support staff. The words hung between us, stark and undeniable. I watched him process them, saw the denial flash across his face, then the anger, then something that might have been recognition. That's not fair, he said finally. Isn't it? Name one thing you sacrificed for my career. One opportunity you passed up so I could pursue mine. You didn't have a career to pursue. You left TechCore before we even got engaged. Because I was pregnant with Emily, and you told me your company didn't offer paternity leave, so someone had to stay home. And that someone was obviously going to be me because your job paid better. Except it only paid better because I'd already been out of the workforce for 6 months dealing with morning sickness so severe I couldn't sit at a computer. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. I could see him rewinding through our history, maybe for the first time actually examining the choices we'd made. The choices I'd made, that he'd benefited from. I didn't force you to quit, he said quietly. No, you just made it clear that my working would be an inconvenience. You made it clear that your career was the priority. And I accepted that because I loved you. And I wanted our family to work. And I thought it was temporary. I sat down in the chair across from his desk, suddenly exhausted. But it was never temporary, was it? 1 year became 2, became 5, became 30. And somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as someone who'd given something up. You started seeing me as someone who'd never had anything to give. I never thought that. You told an entire ballroom of people that I never had a real career. I didn't know. His voice rose in frustration. How was I supposed to know that your work had become this legendary thing? You never told me. I told you I'd been a software engineer. I told you I'd worked on operating systems. I showed you articles I'd written back when we were dating. You never cared enough to remember. He sank back into his chair, and for the first time I could remember, Gerald looked old, defeated. So what happens now? He asked. You take this job, I probably get fired. And we what? Get divorced? The word hung in the air between us. Divorce? In 32 years of marriage, through all our arguments and frustrations and long silences, neither of us had ever said it out loud. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know what happens now. I just know I can't go back to being invisible. I can't pretend tonight didn't happen. I could apologize, he offered, but there was something hollow in his voice. Publicly. I could tell everyone I was wrong, that I didn't appreciate you. Would you mean it? Or would you just be trying to save your job? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I stood up. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. We can talk more tomorrow, after your meeting with HR, after we've both had time to think. Louise, good night, Gerald. I left him sitting in his study and climbed the stairs to the guest bedroom. It was the room that used to be Vincent's before he moved out, still decorated with his old college pennants and a bookshelf full of fantasy novels. I lay down on the bed without changing out of my dress and stared at the ceiling. My phone, which I'd turned back on, buzzed incessantly. Messages from all 3 kids, increasingly worried. Messages from numbers I didn't recognize. People from the party who'd somehow gotten my contact information. Even a message from Victoria. You were magnificent tonight. Sleep well. We'll talk soon. I responded to the kids with a group message. I'm fine. Dad and I had a disagreement, but I'm safe and home. Let's talk tomorrow when everyone's calmer. I love you all. Then I turned the phone off again and closed my eyes. Sleep didn't come easily, but when it did, I dreamed of code. Lines of elegant logic flowing across a screen, solutions blooming like flowers, the pure satisfaction of building something that worked. I hadn't dreamed about programming in 20 years. I woke to sunlight streaming through Vincent's old curtains and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot what had happened. Then it all came rushing back. I showered, changed into casual clothes from the guest room closet, things I'd stored there over the years, and went downstairs. Gerald was in the kitchen, dressed in his suit, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "I made coffee," he said stiffly. "And there's toast." "Thank you." We sat at the kitchen table in awkward silence, both of us drinking coffee, neither of us touching the toast. Finally, Gerald checked his watch. "I need to leave for my meeting," he said. "It's at 9. "Good luck," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want to see him destroyed. I just wanted him to understand. He nodded, grabbed his briefcase, and headed for the door. Then he stopped, turned back. "Louise, whatever happens today, whatever they decide to do with me, I want you to know that I do see you. Maybe not the way I should have, maybe not enough, but I see you. I hope that's true," I said softly. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen with my coffee, trying to figure out what to do with myself. The house felt strange, too quiet. Usually by this time I'd have started laundry, or planned dinner, or run errands. The routines that had structured my days for decades. But today felt different. Today felt like standing on the edge of something new. My phone rang. Emily. "Mom, are you okay? Your message last night was really vague and Dad won't answer his phone." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Your father and I just had a disagreement. He said you embarrassed him at his work party. He said you told everyone some story about being a famous programmer or something." I felt a flash of anger at Gerald's version of events, but I kept my voice calm. "That's not exactly what happened. The CEO of his company recognized me from some work I did before you were born. She wanted to acknowledge it publicly." "Wait, you were a programmer? Since when?" "Since before I met your father. I worked as a software engineer for several years." "You never told me that." Emily sounded genuinely shocked. "I thought you'd always been a stay-at-home mom." "I've been a stay-at-home mom since I was pregnant with you. But before that, I had a career. A good one." There was a long pause. "Mom, why didn't you ever talk about this?" "Because no one ever asked," I said simply. And after a while, it felt like something that belonged to a different person. Someone I used to be. "That's really sad." Emily's voice was soft. "I'm sorry. I should have asked. I should have wanted to know. You were a child, honey. Children don't think about their parents as people with their own histories." "Mom, I'm not a child anymore. I should have been curious." We talked for a while longer, and I found myself telling her about TechCore, about the Patterson Protocol, about the work I'd loved and left behind. Emily listened with what sounded like genuine fascination, occasionally interrupting with questions. "So wait," she said at one point. "Dad's company runs on code you wrote?" "The foundation of it, yes." "And Dad didn't know this?" "No." "Mom, that's insane. How could he not know?" "Because I changed my name when we got married. Because I stopped talking about it. Because he never asked." I paused. "Because I let myself disappear." After we hung up, Leonard called. Then Vincent. Each conversation was similar. Shock, confusion, apologies for never asking about my life before they were born. Vincent, my youngest, got angry on my behalf. "Dad's such a jerk," he said bluntly. "I can't believe he said that about you in public. Your father was thoughtless, but he's not a bad person. He made you cry, Mom. He embarrassed you. That's not okay." I appreciated his loyalty, even as I gently reminded him that relationships were complicated, that his father and I needed to work through this ourselves. Around 11, my phone rang again. This time, it was Victoria. "Louise, I hope I'm not calling too early. Do you have a moment?" "Of course. I wanted to give you an update. Gerald met with our chief people officer this morning. I wasn't in the meeting, but I've been briefed on the outcome." My heart started pounding. "And?" "He's not being fired, but he's being placed on a performance improvement plan and removed from his current position. We're moving him to a lateral role with no direct reports. He'll remain a senior employee, but he won't be in executive leadership anymore." I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Guilt? Vindication? Louise, I want to be clear. This decision wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about judgment. The way he spoke about you demonstrated a profound lack of respect that we can't ignore in our leadership, especially given who you are and what you've contributed to this field. I understand. There's something else. Our legal team has been reviewing the acquisition documents from when we bought TechCore's assets. It appears you were never properly compensated for the intellectual property rights to your code. The original agreement listed several developers, but your name was missing from the final contracts. I was on maternity leave when the company dissolved. I knew they were licensing the code, but I never saw the final paperwork. Well, our legal team believes you're entitled to retroactive compensation. We're still calculating the exact amount, but, Louise, it's going to be substantial. Your code has been fundamental to billions of dollars in revenue over the years. I sat down heavily on the couch. I never expected. You deserve it. You earned it. The money is yours, whether or not you accept the advisory position. She paused, though I still very much hope you will accept it. Can I ask you something, Victoria? Of course. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You could have just quietly acknowledged my contribution and moved on. Why go to all this trouble? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Because 25 years ago, I was a young engineer at a startup. I had a brilliant idea for a new kind of database architecture. And then I got pregnant, and my boss told me I needed to choose between being a mother and being a serious professional. I chose to be both, but it nearly destroyed me. I had to fight for every opportunity, every promotion, every ounce of respect. She took a breath. I built Duncan Technologies to be different, to be the kind of company where brilliance is recognized regardless of gender, regardless of what choices people make about family. When I found out that one of the foundational pieces of our technology was created by a woman who'd been erased from the story, who'd given up her career to raise her family, and who was then dismissed as just a housewife by her own husband, her voice hardened. I wasn't going to let that stand. Not in my company. I felt tears prickling at my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me. Just say yes to the job. We need your voice in our technical strategy sessions. We need your perspective. And frankly, I think you need this too. I think you need to remember who you were before you became invisible. Can I have a few days to think about it? To talk to my family? Take all the time you need. But Louise, don't let anyone talk you out of this. Not your husband, not your kids, not your own doubts. You deserve this second chance. After we hung up, I sat on the couch for a long time, thinking about choices and sacrifices and second chances, thinking about the woman I used to be and the woman I might become. Gerald came home around 2 p.m. He looked exhausted, defeated. He sat down in the armchair across from me without saying anything. Victoria called. I said finally. She told me about your meeting. He nodded slowly. I'm being demoted. Effective immediately. I'm sorry. Are you? There was no anger in his voice, just genuine curiosity. Yes. I never wanted you to lose your position. I just wanted you to see me. I see you now, he said quietly, maybe too clearly. I see what I took from you, what I asked you to give up, what I never even realized I was taking. We sat in silence for a moment. Victoria said they found discrepancies in the TechCore acquisition documents, that I'm owed money for my intellectual property. How much? They're still calculating, but she said it would be substantial. Gerald laughed, but it was a hollow sound. Of course. Of course you're about to become independently wealthy right as I'm being demoted. The universe has a sense of humor. Gerald, no, it's fine. It's actually appropriate. You should have that money. You earned it. He looked at me directly. Are you going to leave me? The question caught me off guard. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know what I want anymore. Everything I thought I knew about my life has shifted. I don't want to lose you. His voice cracked. I know I don't deserve to ask that. I know I took you for granted, but I don't want to lose you. Then we need to figure out what our marriage looks like when I'm not invisible anymore. When I have my own career, my own money, my own identity. Can you handle that? He was quiet for a long time. I don't know, he finally said, but I'd like to try. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even really hope. But it was honest. And that was more than we'd had in a long time. Okay, I said. Let's try. 3 weeks later, I walked into Duncan Technologies as an employee for the first time. The building looked different in daylight, less intimidating than it had been the night of the party. Victoria met me in the lobby herself, ignoring the receptionist's surprised expression. "Louise, welcome. Officially this time." She shook my hand warmly. "Ready for the grand tour?" "As ready as I'll ever be." She led me through security, up to the 15th floor where the executive offices were located. My office was smaller than I'd expected, which was to say, it wasn't ostentatious. A simple desk, ergonomic chair, large windows overlooking the city, and a whiteboard that covered an entire wall. "I had IT set up your computer with access to all our legacy systems," Victoria said. "Jennifer Park has been emailing me daily asking when you'd start. She has about 100 questions for you." I smiled. Jennifer and I had met for coffee twice in the past few weeks. She reminded me of myself at 30, brilliant, enthusiastic, convinced that elegant code could solve any problem. I'm looking forward to working with her. Your official start date isn't until Monday, but I wanted you to have a chance to settle in, get familiar with the systems. No pressure, just exploration. Victoria paused at the door. "How are things at home?" It was a careful question. Victoria knew some of what had happened. She'd been copied on the legal correspondence about my intellectual property settlement, but she'd been respectful about not prying. "Complicated," I admitted. "We're in counseling. Gerald's struggling with the adjustment." "And you?" "I'm struggling too, but for different reasons." I sat down at my new desk, running my hand over the smooth surface. 30 years is a long time to be one thing. Becoming something else feels impossible some days. "But you're here." "But I'm here," I agreed. After Victoria left, I spent an hour just exploring the building. The cafeteria with its gourmet coffee and fresh sushi, the recreation room with ping-pong tables and comfortable couches, the library, an actual library, full of technical manuals and industry publications. I felt like a time traveler, seeing how much the tech world had changed since I'd left it. In the late afternoon, I finally sat down at my computer and logged into the legacy system documentation. And there it was, the Patterson Protocol, my code, now 3 decades old but still recognizable. They'd built on it, expanded it, optimized it, but the core architecture, the elegant simplicity I'd been so proud of, was still there. I was reading through the implementation notes when someone knocked on my open door. "Louise?" It was a man in his 40s, vaguely familiar. "I'm Barry's son, Eric Duncan, VP of Engineering. I wanted to welcome you personally." I stood to shake his hand. "Thank you. Your father must have mentioned me." "Are you kidding? He hasn't stopped talking about you since the party. He's furious with himself for not recognizing your name years ago." Eric sat down in one of my visitor chairs uninvited, but his manner was friendly. "I actually wanted to ask you something. We're planning a complete overhaul of our authentication systems. Jennifer thinks your modular approach could solve some of our scalability issues, but I'm worried about the complexity. Would you be willing to consult on the project?" And just like that, I was working again. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I consulted on Eric's authentication project. I met with Jennifer's team to discuss their system compatibility challenges. I reviewed code, attended meetings, contributed ideas that people actually listened to. It was exhilarating and exhausting. At home, things were harder. Gerald had taken his demotion poorly. He was still working at Duncan. His pride wouldn't let him quit, but he'd become withdrawn, resentful. Our counseling sessions were tense. He wanted me to acknowledge that my success had come at the cost of his failure. I wanted him to understand that his failure had come from his own choices. "You could have defended me," he said during one particularly difficult session. "When Victoria was deciding what to do with me, you could have spoken up." "I wasn't part of that decision," I replied. "And even if I had been, Gerald, what you said was indefensible. I couldn't have fixed that for you." Our therapist, Dr. Reynolds, a patient woman in her 60s, intervened gently. "Gerald, it sounds like you're looking for Louise to take responsibility for the consequences of your actions. Can you see how that might be problematic? I'm not. He stopped, frustrated. I just don't understand why she couldn't have helped me. After everything I've done for this family. What have you done for this family that Louise hasn't also done? Dr. Reynolds asked. The question hung in the air. Gerald couldn't answer it. The kids were adjusting too. Emily had become fascinated by my past, asking endless questions about my work, about what it was like being a woman in tech in the early 90s. Leonard was supportive but distant. He'd always been closer to his father. Vincent was angry, protective, ready to write Gerald off entirely. You don't have to stay with him, Vincent told me over lunch one Saturday. Gerald was at the golf course, trying to maintain his old networking routines. You have your own money now. You could get your own place, start over. It's not that simple, honey. We've built a life together. A life where he made you invisible. A life where I let myself become invisible. I corrected gently. Your father was thoughtless, yes, but I made choices too. I could have fought harder to maintain my identity. I didn't. That's not fair to yourself, Mom. Maybe it wasn't, but it felt true. The settlement from Duncan came through 6 weeks after I started working there. The amount was staggering, more money than I'd ever imagined having. Enough to retire comfortably, to travel, to do anything I wanted. The legal team had calculated royalties based on revenue generated from systems using my code, adjusted for inflation and lost opportunity costs. When I told Gerald the amount, he went pale. That's more than I'll make in the rest of my career, he said quietly. Probably. So you don't need me anymore. Financially, I mean. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He'd aged in the past few weeks. New lines around his eyes, gray creeping into his temples. He looked smaller somehow. Diminished. I never needed you financially, Gerald. I needed you emotionally. As a partner. As someone who saw me and valued me. I paused. That's what I'm still trying to figure out. If that person exists. If he ever did. I'm trying, he said, and his voice cracked. I know I'm not doing well at it. I know I'm resentful and angry and petty. But I am trying. I know you are. We were trying. Both of us. Some days it felt possible. Other days it felt like we were speaking different languages, unable to bridge the gap between who we'd been and who we were becoming. 2 months into my new position, Victoria called me into her office. How would you feel about speaking at the Women in Technology conference next month? She asked. They want someone to talk about career transitions, about finding your way back to tech after time away. I immediately thought of you. My stomach clenched. Public speaking? I've never... You spoke to a ballroom full of people at our party. That was different. I was in shock. I wasn't thinking. Which is exactly why it was so powerful. Victoria leaned forward. Louise, there are thousands of women out there who gave up their careers for their families, who've been told they're just housewives, who've forgotten that they were brilliant, accomplished, valuable. You could show them that it's not too late, that they can come back. I thought about it. The idea terrified me, but it also felt important. Okay, I said. I'll do it. The night before the conference, I couldn't sleep. I'd written and rewritten my speech a dozen times. Gerald found me at midnight, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, still editing. You're going to be great, he said, and there was something genuine in his voice, something that reminded me of the man I'd married, before we'd both gotten lost in our roles. I'm terrified. Good. Terror means it matters. He sat down across from me. Louise, I need to tell you something. I've been offered a position at another company. Similar level to what I had before the demotion. Better pay, actually. My heart sank. You're leaving Duncan? I think I have to. Working there, seeing you succeed while I'm relegated to a nothing job. It's killing me. I know that makes me weak. I know it makes me small. But it's the truth. I understood. It wasn't what I wanted, but I understood. When would you start? 2 weeks, if I accept. He looked at me carefully. I wanted to talk to you first, to see if this feels like me running away or like me trying to find my footing again. Can it be both? He smiled sadly. Yeah, I guess it can. Take the job, I said. You need to rebuild your sense of self just as much as I do. Maybe we can't do that in the same building. The conference was held at a downtown hotel, in a ballroom that held 300 people. I stood backstage, listening to Victoria introduce me, feeling the same terror I'd felt at Gerald's party. But this time it was different. This time I'd chosen to be here. "Please welcome Louise Mitchell," Victoria said, and I walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. I couldn't see faces, just shapes in the darkness. I gripped the podium and began to speak. "My name is Louise Mitchell, and until 2 months ago, I'd been invisible for 30 years. I told them my story, about TechCore and the Patterson Protocol, about choosing family over career, about the party, the humiliation, the revelation, about finding my way back. I'm not going to tell you it's easy," I said. "I'm not going to tell you that everything works out perfectly. My marriage is struggling. Some days I feel like an imposter in my own life. Some days I'm angry at myself for all the years I wasted. Some days I'm angry at a system that made me choose in the first place." I paused, finding my rhythm. "But I'm also going to tell you that it's worth it. Finding yourself again, remembering who you were before you became someone's wife or someone's mother, it's worth the fear and the uncertainty and the pain. You are not just anything. You are whole people with histories and skills and value that exists independent of anyone else." The room was silent. I could feel them listening. If you've forgotten who you were, start remembering. If you've been told you're too old, too out of touch, too far removed, ignore them. Your brilliance didn't disappear. It was just waiting for you to reclaim it. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. Women stood, some crying, some smiling, all of them seeing themselves in my story. Afterward, dozens of people approached me. Women in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Women who'd given up engineering careers, medical careers, law careers. Women who'd been told they were too old to come back. Women who needed to hear that someone had done it. I gave them my email. I promised to help however I could. I felt, for the first time in decades, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When I got home that night, Gerald was waiting up. "How did it go?" he asked. "It was incredible," I said, and I meant it. He smiled, and it was real. "I'm proud of you, Louise. I know I haven't said that enough. I know I haven't been what you needed, but I am proud of you." "Thank you," I whispered. We still had so much to figure out. Our marriage, our future, who we were to each other now. But in that moment, it felt like maybe we'd found a starting place. 6 months after the conference, I sat in my office at Duncan Technologies reviewing code for a new project when Jennifer knocked on my door. "Got a minute?" she asked. "I want to run something by you." I waved her in. These impromptu sessions had become my favorite part of the job. The collaborative problem-solving. The meeting of minds across generations. "We're stuck on the data migration issue," she said, pulling up a chair. "The legacy system architecture is fighting us at every turn." I smiled. "It's fighting you because you're trying to force it to do something it wasn't designed for. What if instead of migrating all at once, you created a bridge protocol that allows both systems to coexist temporarily?" Jennifer's eyes lit up. "Like a translation layer but more sophisticated?" "Exactly. Let the old system teach the new system over time. Gradual evolution instead of forced revolution." She grabbed a marker and started sketching on my whiteboard. We spent the next hour lost in the problem, building a solution piece by piece. When we finally cracked it, Jennifer hugged me impulsively. "You're a genius," she said. "How did I not see that?" "You would have. You just needed to step back and look at it differently." I paused. "That's what experience gives you. Not necessarily better ideas, just different perspectives." After Jennifer left, I checked my email. There was a message from Dr. Reynolds, our marriage counselor, confirming our session for tomorrow. Gerald and I had been going twice a week for the past 6 months. Some sessions were productive. Others felt like we were speaking across an unbridgeable chasm, but we kept showing up. That had to count for something. My phone buzzed. Emily. "Mom, are you free for dinner tonight? I want to talk to you about something." "Of course, sweetheart. Your place or mine? How about that Italian restaurant you like?" 7 o'clock? I agreed and spent the rest of the afternoon wondering what she wanted to discuss. Emily had been different since the party. More curious about my life, more present. We'd grown closer, but there was still a formality between us, a carefulness that hadn't been there before. The restaurant was crowded, but Emily had reserved a quiet corner table. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin. "What's wrong?" I asked after we'd ordered. "Nothing's wrong. She took a breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened. About my own career, about the choices I've been making." Emily was a marketing executive at a pharmaceutical company. Successful, ambitious, always climbing. "Okay," I said carefully. "Tom and I have been talking about having kids," she said. Tom was her husband of 5 years. "And every time we talk about it, I get this tight feeling in my chest. Because I know what everyone expects. They expect me to do what you did. Step back from my career, focus on family. Tom says he'd support whatever I want, but his mother keeps making comments about how important it is for mothers to be home with their children." I felt a familiar anger rising. "And what do you want?" "I don't want to give up my career. I've worked so hard to get where I am." Her eyes filled with tears. "But I also don't want to be seen as a bad mother. I don't want to choose between being successful and being a good parent." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Emily, listen to me. The fact that you have to choose is the problem, not you. Your father never had to choose. He got to have both, a career and a family, because I gave up my career to make that possible. But you had 3 kids. That's different." "It's not different. Whether it's 1 child or 5, the question is the same. Why should women have to sacrifice their identities when men don't?" I squeezed her hand. "I don't regret raising you and your brothers, but I regret that I felt like I had no other choice. I regret that I lost myself in the process." "I don't want to lose myself," Emily whispered. "Then don't. Find a different way. Hire help. Make Tom be an equal partner. Actually equal, not just saying the words. Set boundaries with his mother. Build the life you want, not the life everyone expects you to have. What if I can't do both? What if I'm not good enough? Emily, you are brilliant and capable and strong. If you want to have children and keep your career, you'll find a way. And if you decide you don't want children at all, that's okay too. The only wrong choice is the one you make because you feel obligated." She wiped her eyes, smiling shakily. "When did you get so wise?" "When I finally remembered who I was before I became invisible." We talked for hours about choices and sacrifices and the impossible standards women still faced. When we finally left the restaurant, Emily hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom, for showing me that it's possible to find yourself again, even if it takes 30 years. I'd prefer if you didn't wait that long," I said with a smile. The counseling session the next day was difficult. Dr. Reynolds had asked us to talk about our vision for the future, individually and as a couple. Gerald went first. "I want to rebuild my career at the new company. I want to prove that the demotion at Duncan wasn't the end of my professional life." He paused. "And I want to rebuild my marriage. I want Louise to trust me again." "Trust you to do what?" Dr. Reynolds asked. "To see her, to value her, to be a real partner." Dr. Reynolds turned to me. "Louise, what do you want?" "I want to keep growing in my career. I want to mentor younger engineers, help other women find their way back to tech. I want to use my platform to make a difference." I looked at Gerald. "And I want to figure out if we can have a marriage built on equality instead of hierarchy." "Can you?" Dr. Reynolds asked. "Can you both have what you want within this marriage?" It was the question we'd been dancing around for months. "I don't know," I admitted. "I love Gerald. Or I love who he used to be, who I thought he was. But I don't know if the man he actually is can handle being married to the woman I've become." Gerald flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it? You took a job at another company because you couldn't stand watching me succeed. You resent my money, my recognition, my independence. How is that being a partner? I took that job so I could rebuild my self-respect." His voice rose. "So I could stop feeling like a failure every time I walked into the office. But you made your feelings my problem. You made me responsible for managing your emotions about my success. Dr. Reynolds let us argue, occasionally redirecting but mostly just bearing witness. Finally, she spoke. You're both at a crossroads. Louise, you've rediscovered your identity and your worth. Gerald, you're trying to rebuild yours. The question is whether you can do that together or whether you need to do it apart. The room fell silent. I don't want to give up on us, Gerald said quietly. 32 years is a long time to walk away from. 32 years is also a long time to spend being invisible, I replied. I can't go back to that. I won't. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking for a chance to build something new, something better. I looked at him, really looked at him. He meant it. I could see that he did. But meaning it and being able to do it were different things. Okay, I said slowly, but it has to be different. Really different. I need you to celebrate my successes, not resent them. I need you to take equal responsibility for our household, not treat it as my job. I need you to see me as your equal in every way. I can do that, he said. Can you? I challenged. Because when I got the settlement money, you spiraled. When I spoke at the conference, you barely acknowledged it. When Victoria promoted me to senior technology advisor last month, you didn't even say congratulations. He looked stricken. You got promoted? 2 weeks ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to deal with your resentment. Louise, this is what I mean, Gerald. If we're going to make this work, I need to be able to share my life with you. The good parts and the hard parts. And you need to be genuinely happy for me, not threatened. Dr. Reynolds intervened. I'm going to suggest something. Take a separation, not a divorce, not yet, but time apart to figure out who you each are independently. Then decide if you want to rebuild together. I felt relief wash over me. Yes, I think that's right. Gerald looked devastated. You want to separate? I want clarity, I said gently. I want us both to figure out who we are when we're not trying to fit into old patterns. Maybe that leads back to each other. Maybe it doesn't. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, if that's what you need. 3 weeks later, I helped Gerald move into a furnished apartment across town. It was amicable, sad, strange. We weren't divorcing. We were just pausing. The house felt different with him gone. Quieter, emptier, but also, paradoxically, more like mine. I threw myself into work. Victoria had asked me to lead a new initiative mentoring women returning to tech after career breaks. I developed a program, recruited participants, created curriculum. The first cohort of 15 women started in January. They were brilliant, every one of them. Engineers who'd left for children or elderly parents or husbands' careers. Women who'd been told they were too old, too out of touch, too far behind. Women who, like me, had forgotten their own brilliance. Watching them rediscover their abilities, seeing their confidence grow, felt like healing something broken inside myself. One evening, 8 months after the separation began, Gerald called. Can we talk? He asked. In person? We met at a coffee shop halfway between my house and his apartment. He looked good, rested, healthy, different somehow. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said. A lot of therapy, on my own. And I realize now that I was trying to make you small so I could feel big. Not consciously, but that's what I was doing. I nodded, letting him continue. The truth is, I was threatened by you from the beginning. When we met, you were this brilliant engineer, and I was just a business major who liked computers. You knew things I didn't understand. You could do things I couldn't do. And instead of being awed by that, instead of celebrating it, I spent 30 years trying to diminish it, trying to make myself feel superior by making you feel lesser. Gerald, let me finish. Please. He took a breath. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm not even sure that's what I want anymore. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. And I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. I felt tears on my cheeks. Thank you, I whispered. That means more than you know. You deserve better than I gave you, he said. You deserved better all along. We talked for hours. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in decades. About mistakes and regrets and growth. About who we'd been and who we'd become. About whether two people could change enough to find their way back to each other. In the end, we didn't have an answer. But we had honesty. And that was something. A year after the party that changed everything, I stood in front of a classroom at Duncan Technologies. 23 women sat before me. My mentorship program had grown. Your brilliance didn't disappear, I told them. It was just waiting for you to remember it. I thought about the woman I'd been, crying in that bathroom. I thought about the woman I'd become, confident, valued, seen. I thought about all the years I'd lost and all the years I'd reclaimed, and I thought about the question someone had asked me after my conference speech. Do you regret it? The years you gave up? The truth was complicated. I didn't regret my children. I didn't regret the moments of joy and love and family, but I regretted losing myself. I regretted believing that I had to choose. I regretted every time I'd made myself smaller. But regret wasn't where my story ended anymore. It was just where my new story began. You are not just anything, I told the women in my class. You are complete. You are valuable. You are seen. And finally, after all these years, I believed it about myself too. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.